Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 45 of Humanity versus Insanity, the Crane Report. I actually just calculated that this is the 100th live show that I've done from the Plymouth studio since we started the series of Humanity versus Insanity and Fracking Nightmare. I'm not sure whether that's a landmark, but it's certainly a landmark day, not a good one, in the history of Greece. And after last week's episode, in which William Engdahl discussed his insights into the real role of Varoufakis, and just a few hours before we went live last Monday, of course, the Greek electorate had recorded a resounding no to the proposition being put forward by the European bankers. And in the immediate aftermath of that, Varoufakis resigned. And William's observation was that he had effectively done what he was put in to do, which was lead the Greek government down a particular path that would ultimately lead to its financial decimation. And sadly, that seems to have been borne out. So despite some pretty interesting, rather aggressive emails and other correspondence last week from the hard left, who were distraught that we had the audacity to call out their new hero. Yet it would seem that, as I suggested, the hero was in fact the arch villain. Well, events over the past week, and not least the last few hours, have shown that William's insights were not only on the money, but actually on point in terms of where the prognosis is heading. So I'm very pleased to welcome back for a further discussion William Engdahl. So William, welcome back to Humanity versus Insanity.
Thank you, Ian.
It's quite unusual for us to have the same guest 2 weeks running, but this is such a crucial issue here. Yeah. And I mean, obviously, we got a lot of attention last week. We had a very large live audience. There's been, I think, almost 5,000 views of the show we did last week on YouTube. And I'm sure that there'll be a lot of interest in what you have to say today. So just a few hours ago, we learned that no in Greek, oxy, really means yes. And basically, having literally achieved a euphoric moment Sunday week ago with the announcement that the Greek electorate, the citizens of the country, had soundly rejected the proposition for more austerity. The Greek government have effectively said, well, actually, you know what? More of the same.
Yeah. Ian, this is worse than a tragedy, but it's clear at this point, to me anyway, that the entire scenario, the dog and pony show that's known as Syriza, was brought in by the oligarchs with support of the Troika to lead the Greek people into an absolute destructive dead end, which they did beautifully. It's not, I beg to differ with you, it's not just Varoufakis who, betrayed the Greek government. It's the Syriza party, Tsipras and the whole lot of them. There may be some honest factions within it, but they don't have a voice. Look at who Tsipras appoints immediately after Varoufakis' resignation, the day after the referendum. Sakalotos, Oxford-educated so-called Marxist, one of these cafe Marxists that the British like so much to cultivate in their elite universities, to lead the genuine social protest into an absolute dead end smash against the wall. And that's what they did exactly with this betrayal. I call it perfidy in an article I've just written that should be up on the internet in a day or two, I hope. There's a deeper problem here, though, that I reflected on a lot over the last days, and that is the guilt of the Greek people. And bear with me a moment while I explain this, because this is not obvious at face value. I know very well how guilt works on a personal level. Believe me, I've spent a lot of energy in my own life experience working through guilt from childhood and this and that and other things. And it goes in three phases. You feel guilty that you've broken the rules of society. Doesn't matter what the society. It can be Greece, it can be the European Union, the Eurozone. And then if you feel guilty, you fear obviously that you're going to be punished for your breaking the rules. And then comes the punishment. And at a certain point, there comes an inner rebellion and a desire for revenge against the people who are punishing you. And that's also quite lawful sequence. So now Varoufakis, Tsipras, and now the new finance minister, Sakalotos, who's an oligarch, by the way. He's a scion of an oligarch shipping family connected with the old military network.
Eton educated and Queen's College, Oxford, I believe.
Yes, something like that. Yeah. He's an Oxford man. But not that all Oxford graduates are bad people, but this one certainly is bad for the betrayal that they did of their own nation 5 days after the 61% no to more austerity is more than a slap in the face. It's incredible that so little is reported in the mainstream Western media about how brazen this is. But you can believe the Greek people are now boiling to the point of becoming close to exploding. And pray to God that the revenge part of this equation that I just mentioned does not come to pass, and that the Greeks find a better solution.
So, William, you said about the guilt. Now, is this the guilt for taking advantage of the easy money after joining the euro in 2001?
No, that comes later, but it's the guilt about the revelation in 2009 by Papandreou, when he became PASOK, Socialist Prime Minister, Social Democrat. Papandreou family is known widely in the Greek community that I know as a American agent, essentially. They always have been. The father, and Georgios Papandreou, the one who was in 2009, discovering the great fraud that got Greece into the Eurozone.
Which was the Goldman Sachs fraud.
Goldman Sachs thing, yeah. And derivative tricks that manipulated the 3% deficit and so to make them qualify. So Papandreou, when that happened, it was a socialist PASOK government under Semitis, and Papandreou was foreign minister. So he knew where the bones were buried the whole time. His job in 2009, it's very clear, was to come in and explode that bomb and turn... Keep in mind that the Greek crisis broke out in October 2009, and this was in the aftermath of the September 2008 Lehman Brothers collapse that Goldman Sachs also ignited through the person of Henry Paulson, Treasury Secretary under George W. in America, and detonated a global financial meltdown of a scale that's never been seen before in human history. And the effects of that on the world economy, on world shipping, which is the mainstay of the Greek economy, even though the shipping companies and the oligarchs pay not a penny of taxes to the Greek government. That's another theme. So Greece was running a deficit because suddenly the world economy had collapsed. And Papandreou revealed that as though this was a great secret that he had uncovered and wanted to clean up the mess. And who advised Papandreou in 2009 to impose this draconian austerity but Yanis Varoufakis, the just resigned finance minister? So the whole thing from the beginning has been orchestrated and set up. Mario Draghi, the president of the European Central Bank, who's he? Former Goldman Sachs senior partner in Europe. And in February of this year, Draghi cut off the acceptance of Greek state bonds as collateral for new credits in Greece. So he precipitated the new phase of the Greek crisis. So this thing is on many levels such, but the guilt, going back to the guilt of the Greek people, they, because of the barrage of propaganda in the oligarch-controlled domestic Greek media, as well as the mainstream media, New York Times, Washington Post, FAZ in Germany, the Daily Telegraph, you name it, made Greece to be the cheaters and the fraudsters of all-time history, which is a lie. And so the Greek people felt bad. They bought new houses. Easy money came because of this original sin of lying to get into the Eurozone, low interest rates, blah, 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 blah. And now suddenly, that's the only explanation why the Greek people voted for such horrible governments from 2009 on to even the Syriza. Because you can feel if somebody's lying to you or not. The words are not the important thing. You have a gut feeling. Every human being has that. And you can feel if this sly playboy Varoufakis, who lives in a luxury penthouse in Athens and has
an island. He has an island home in Aegis, I think, doesn't he, as well?
Okay, I'm not at all surprised. I wonder how much money Tsipras has made on knowing what he was going to do after the yes vote, or the no vote, rather, in terms of his own personal financial fortune. I can imagine there's one or two Swiss bank accounts, or maybe in Gibraltar, that are greatly enhanced by Tsipras.
Well, this is the other thing, isn't it? Because, I mean, we've been talking about this for at least the last 5 years that I know of. And actually, I think I first started talking about the manipulation of the coming financial crash in 2006. Mm-hmm. Of course, it first raised its head in 2007 with the collapse of the first building society in the UK. And then, of course, it all went downhill from there with the big one in October 2008. And then we've seen the absolute destruction of the easy Euro economies like Ireland, Spain, Portugal, Italy, and, of course, Greece being on point. And at this juncture, anyone in Ireland, Spain, Portugal, and Italy who doesn't wake up to the fact that what's happening right now in Greece is going to be happening to them sooner rather than later, and to the other countries not long after that, then I would suggest that they are delusional.
Ian, I would add two other countries to that. I would add France and ultimately Germany, as incredible as that might sound. The euro was an oligarchic European construct to bring Europe into the dollar world, to make Europe a large equal partner of the United States in terms of the new world order that George Bush Sr. talked about in 1991 in his Senate address. The euro from the beginning, it was known. Helmut Kohl, who signed on to the euro when his bankers convinced him that it would be to Germany's advantage a couple of years after. But in the early 90s, the Maastricht Treaty that created the European Central Bank, the European monetary system, it was known that you can't have a single currency without a single political entity. But they didn't care. They wanted to create this banker's dictatorship over the economies of Europe and do it the European way, step by step, not the American way where they smash anybody who opposes it and puts them in jail. They smash slow motion in Europe. So that's what's happened. Interestingly, the UK kept out of it after George Soros broke the Bank of England, so-called. The Scandinavian countries, Sweden and Denmark, kept out of it. But by and large, you have the core of the European Union in this horrible construct called the euro. And up until now, it's greatly benefited the German economy, which is why Schäuble, who probably ought to get an award I don't know, the Klaus Barbie Award or the Joseph Mengele Award for humanitarian sadism for what he's done to Greece, completely forgetting Germany's own history with the London debt agreements in the 1950s after World War II, where the Allied powers agreed to forgive most of the Versailles debt of Germany so that the country could economically recover.
Absolutely.
Not for Schäuble.
Well,
So
yeah,
the German.
go on.
No, that's the basic point.
Yeah, just to, I thought, what could I do for the Greek people? And I thought that the only thing that I could probably do is actually recommend that they all get a jar of this. Because they are seriously going to need it. I mean, I was looking through the document that was released today, and it is an outrage. I mean, if the Greeks think that they have been in a period of austerity over the last few years, they ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah.
Because basically, this document, literally, and even some British economists are already calling it the Greek Versailles Treaty. Yeah. Because there is no way that Greece can ever recover from this. It is going to be a total asset grab. And of course, I'm sure that what's happened over the last week or so is all the oligarchs and their hangers-on have been moving whatever funds they can, not just in the last week, but over the last few months, have been moving whatever funds they can out of the country. Sure. So the only thing that that's left in the country is basically pocket money anyway.
Well, and now a good chunk of the money, as I understand the agreement that Tsipras made and Tsakalotos with the EU and the Troika, a good chunk of the money will go to restructure, quote unquote, the Greek banks. The Greek banks are banks owned by the Greek oligarchs who pay no taxes in Greece. So it's, again, the bankers' bailout of the situation.
So it's basically it's yet another piece in the movement of global wealth into a smaller and smaller number of pockets. So what we're seeing is the total financial devastation of basically the middle classes and the working classes. And
sure.
We're getting to the point, aren't we, where this element of society is not only going to be surplus to requirements, but is actually going to be a drain on the resources of the oligarchs and of those who are wielding the power and holding the wealth.
I personally, Ian, am convinced that this is the beginning of the end of this horrible project called the euro. This is, it looks like the euro oligarchs are defiantly victorious in subduing Greece, but I think it's going to be a Pyrrhic victory for the oligarchs and for the U.S. because it's just it's not possible. Other countries are going to look at what was done and realize you're not in a peaceful currency union that's meant to make trade more easy and therefore greater and more positive for the economies. You're in a structure that's designed to kill the nation state.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, what options do the Greek people have here? I mean, on the basis of this agreement that's been put out, I mean, basically none. Because they might as well kiss goodbye to anything they think they own. I mean, what we're looking at is, pensions had already been cut to the bone as part of austerity. Now we're looking at pensions being cut further. We're looking at the retirement age, being raised. We're looking at taxes being raised. We're looking at benefits being cut. And this in a country that was already in, an advanced state of austerity. I mean, to the point of what was what was occurring was effectively financial warfare.
Yeah.
In fact, the country would have been treated better had it just simply surrendered to an aggressive nation, as opposed to somebody that's come in and done the same through the stealth of the finance community.
Yeah, well, that's the weapon. Henry Kissinger said it in the 1970s. If you control oil, you control nations. You know the quote, I'm sure.
Exactly.
If you control food, you control the people. If you control money, you control the whole world. And look at the money. Follow the money trail on the Greek crisis, and you will understand everything. There's no Greek politician since the beginning of the 90s that I can think of who has not been bought and paid for by the oligarchs. They control the media, they control telecommunications, they control all the politicians of all parties, including Syriza, as is now patently clear to anybody who looks at it.
Well, so what would your counsel be now to the Greek people? I mean, obviously they've got politicians that have sold them literally down the proverbial Swanee. I mean, they are up the creek without any kind of paddle.
Yeah.
So what would your counsel be to the people of Greece now?
Were I a Greek, I would call on my fellow countrymen to look at this question of their guilt feeling, because guilt is a trap. Guilt is a bottomless pit that allows outside forces to manipulate you. If it's personal guilt in the family as a little child that you did something bad and the mother punishes you and so forth, that's a way of controlling you and manipulating you. And if they can look at their guilt and realize they're not guilty, they are not guilty of the Euro shenanigans of Goldman Sachs in 2000, 2001 to get into the Euro. They're not guilty of the corrupt fraud of the oligarch banks in Greece. They're not guilty that the Greek ship owners, the largest ship owners grouping in the entire world, pay not a penny of taxes to the Greek nation that they suck off of for 50, 60 years now. The Greek people are wonderful people. They have a beautiful tradition, a history. They're social. They love to sing and dance. And I think that's something certain people in the West, certain oligarchs in the West, really hate about the Greeks, that they're human beings and that they... and I think right now they've forgotten that because of this shock of the 2009 expose and the way it's been played to paralyze the Greeks from taking action. I think if they get back their sense of being good, they will find out ways to correct this. They will make a reverse color revolution against these corrupt politicians that have sold them down the river without a paddle.
Well, they definitely have to take back their country. I mean, in the first instance, they've got to obviously take back their government. And I mean, they basically got to... My recommendation would be to go and read Saul Alinsky and Rules for Radicals, and start the process within your community. And the beauty is that within the Mediterranean culture, it is very much community or family and community oriented, much more so than in the UK, for example, or in the sort of western part of Europe.
Or in Germany.
Indeed. And so consequently, this family and community bonding may be one of the greatest assets that they've got right now. And they should actually focus on developing the family and the community spirit, looking at local trading, looking at minimizing their interaction with central government, because central government has demonstrated that basically it's going to, well, they're going to need the Vaseline. Any interaction with central government, they need the Vaseline. Any interaction with the bankers, they need the Vaseline. So they need to start actually focusing on the local community and build literally from the ground up. Does that seem like a reasonable proposition?
Well, I think anything that brings Greek people into positive action to change this horrible victim feeling, guilt feeling, the power of this guilt thing. The Germans know it very well. After World War I, the Versailles Treaty wrote in the clause, paragraph 231, that Germany bears the sole guilt for everything that happened in the cause of World War I, and therefore Germany, and Germany alone, must pay all the war reparations to the Allied victors, Britain and France and Italy, in order that Britain and France and Italy can repay J.P. Morgan in New York and the U.S. government for the bonds that financed the British, French, and Italian war effort against Germany.
Well, and it was the Warburgs who were financing Germany, wasn't it?
Well, it's a very complex thing, but just to get on this point again, then after World War II, C.J. Jung, this ex-Freud psychoanalyst, wrote an essay in 1945 saying, we must make the German people feel that they are collectively guilty for Hitler and everything Hitler did. And I've lived in Germany for 30 years, and I can tell you I've talked to older Germans that lived through the war, and the way Hitler was packaged is the way Varoufakis and Tsipras and company are packaged in Greece, or the way Obama was packaged. This is a man for change in America. And so people have hope. You know, in the worst depression in German history in 1931, caused by austerity from the Brüning government, by the way, German industry with the backing of London and Wall Street banks financed Hitler to smash the trade unions and deliver labor into the Nazi system. This is the function of guilt, you know, that German people should feel guilty about this external manipulation. And that's, I think, the core of the problem in Greece, even though it's not very customary to talk about collective guilt in a population. If the Greek people can look at that and understand they are not guilty, then they will have a power that will terrify these oligarchs.
Yeah.
Believe me.
Well, they're a passionate people, and I mean, they are no more guilty than the people of the other Euro countries who succumbed to the easy money. Literally, it was a case of even if you didn't want money, it was being thrown at you.
Sure.
To go buy your second house, buy your bigger house, buy your boat, buy your second car, whatever you needed, and get as people into as much debt as possible. And then, of course, pull the rug out from under them, at which point, I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's the microcosm of the individual or the macrocosm of the nation state. Once
Exactly.
the rug's pulled out from under you, if you're in hock, he who holds the, they gotcha. So you're absolutely right. I mean, basically, the people need to certainly understand that, they were manipulated into this. There was a much bigger game. And, the challenge now is not to get suckered into the next stage of the globalist game. Because, of course, what is going to happen now is that Tsipras and his cohorts are going to be forced to effectively sell off whatever remains of the state, to sell off whatever remains of public property in Greece.
The oil companies, exactly.
And the property is going, the top dollar property is going to be taken up by the Russians and the Chinese as they move into the country to take advantage. So we're going to see.
I don't know if they'll be allowed to take up the top dollar properties. They might get a few, but I think the Western oligarchs have their eye on exactly the cherries that they want to pick in Greece and the privatization.
Well, I'm sure they'll get first bite.
Yeah.
But certainly the prognosis is, however we look at it, is not good. I mean, obviously, in the worst case scenario, it fuels the rise of the right, which of course once again would be manipulated. So this has to be an opportunity for a new political wave to move forward. It won't come as a wave. It's got to be built from the ground up, because if it's not, then it will be shut down, obviously, before it even gets to first base.
Yeah, it has to be done on the basis of Greeks who feel no guilt about the crisis. They realize that they've been victimized and don't want to be victims anymore. And they want to build their nation and not build the construct called the Eurozone, which is de facto a corporativist structure designed to kill the nation state. And this Greek crisis is a very, very important part, if we step back and look at the Eurozone as a whole, or the EU as a whole, of destroying the European nation state so that power can accrue to a bunch of headless bureaucrats in Brussels who answer to nobody except the oligarchs who give them bribe money and have the blackmail on them. People like Tusk or people like Juncker, this Luxembourgeois former prime minister who's really not a good man. I've seen him in person several times. And he is a very troubled human being. But, these are all unelected people. The populations have not voted for these leaders who are deciding the fates of nations. And this is going to destroy Germany every bit as much as it's going to destroy Greece.
Because, of course, their ultimate goal is the one world government. I mean, they've never made any secret of that. This is a wonderful piece of artwork that appeared actually in East London about 3 years, almost exactly 3 years ago now. Mm-hmm. And it absolutely illustrates what's occurring here. It is the global banksters, and even the global banksters, of course, aren't necessarily the inner sanctum, but the global banksters playing their game of monopoly on the backs of humanity.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. And of course, for anyone who's ever played Monopoly, very few people have ever played it right through to the bitter end. But the nature of the game is total ownership of the board. Most people never actually get to finish a game, and they simply total up who's got most in terms of cash or property on the board, and whoever's accumulated the most is declared the winner. But that's not the purpose of the game. The purpose of the game is total ownership, total economic annihilation of your opponents. Mm-hmm. And, obviously, until you reach the sort of final stage, then, people gang up on other players to take them out of the game. And then, of course, it comes down to the ultimately the final two. And, what we're seeing right now, of course, is the global banksters effectively working in unison to literally strip the global assets. I mean, if they don't do it through bailouts, and we looked last week at the horrendous magnitude of some of those bailouts. With some of those banks, Citibank, the Citigroup, getting in excess of $2 trillion in bailout. And the total Greek debt is $407 billion. So it's just absurd.
Yeah, Ian, let me suggest something. The Greek operation and the way it played out, even though it was clearly pre-planned by a long time, and what's happening in general in the West are not symptoms of an elite that has unlimited power. They are symptoms of desperation in a collapsing empire, much so as the British Empire after 1919, where they thought, okay, we have the League of Nations, that's our continuation of empire on a grand scale. We have this, we control the mandate for Palestine, and we have this and that and so forth. The British Empire was already dead and in denial. So is it with the Atlanticist empire that was created in 1945, or actually well before the end of the war. And that now the American century is in its death agony, and everything connected with it, the Eurozone, the Brussels, and so forth, is going down the tubes. And I've said this since the middle of the 2005, 2006. The only future of the world economy at this point that is not choking in debt. Russia has precious little state debt. China is it's a state-controlled economy and central bank, so debt is just an accounting fiction for the most part. They're trying to figure out the best mix with their stock market and this and that and the other thing. Now they realize the stock market by American Wall Street rules is a bear trap. So I think they will correct that very seriously, and that's not a big deal for China. But the future lies in the East, and the East is an open, non-imperial project. The fusion of the BRICS countries, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. They met in Ufa in Russia this past week, and nary a peep of honest coverage of that has appeared in the mainstream Anglo-Saxon media that I've seen anyway. Groundbreaking decisions to integrate India and Pakistan, which Lord Mountbatten managed to put at each other's throat when the British left India, the Greater India, after the war. That friction point is on its way to being dissolved, as they both need a larger framework to work in, other than the IMF and the bankrupt dollar system that has hurt them for so many decades. So there's a whole new, not a whole new world, a whole new ordering going on in the world, ordering, not order, not New World Order, but ordering of peaceful nations coming together to find synergies where they can cooperate. And it incorporates half of the world's population. It incorporates 40% of the real GDP of the world. It has all the technologies, all the raw materials, the population base. They're building railroads all over Eurasia. They're going to crisscross Eurasia. It's the nightmare of Halford Mackinder. I think I mentioned this last week.
Absolutely, yep.
Because Eurasia is impermeable to the U.S. naval power that was the basis of controlling the world for the last 40, 50 years of the U.S. military strategy. And the knuckleheads in Washington really are beside themselves what to do about this. Because it's peaceful. It's not responding to a slap in the face with a slap back in the face. Of course, there are counter-sanctions out of survival, but that's allowed Russia to become self-sufficient instead of being a vassal of U.S. agribusiness in the food area. They're building their own domestic defense industry because they realize it's non-reliable to rely on France or other Western partners for technology. And they're relying on China for machine tools because the Germans were so stupid. Merkel, when she buckled under to the U.S. pressure and imposed the sanctions against the open opposition of the German big industry, now the machine tools in Russia are coming from China. That market is not going to be recaptured by Germany if the sanctions are dropped. The China-Russia thing has become so paramount strategically for both countries' survival that they have a symbiosis that's developing. It's not the old Stalin-Mao, control and be controlled. It's a symbiosis of a different quality.
And when we look at Chinese technology as well, I mean, you say they're building railways. I mean, they're not just building railways, they're building maglev links. I mean, here in the UK, we're talking about building a high-speed railway line, maybe in 10 or 15 years' time, basically using a technology that's been around since the 18th century. And, we haven't moved forward. And yet, in China, they've got the maglev technology. They're developing the maglev technology. It's working.
I've been on it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, it's undoubtedly the way forward. And it's like all technology. Once you've made that first step to break into the new paradigm, then basically you no longer mess with the old.
Well, not only that, in the last 10 years, because of their own domestic infrastructure needs, the Chinese have become the world's premier builders of high-speed rail infrastructure in the world. Not the Canadians, not the Germans, not the French can come close to what they have accomplished. So they are in a premier position to expand this, and it's the Russians are locking into it now with the Eurasian Economic Union, and now on the UFA BRICS forum, the BRICS Bank, the infrastructure bank, has been signed by all major parties: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. India and Pakistan have been admitted to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Iran is the likely next member. And, this thing is developing so fast that they held a joint summit of BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation countries, which don't entirely 100% overlap. SCO has some members that BRICS doesn't. And this is building this symbiosis among the so-called developing countries, or the poor countries, or the countries of the South, as Putin put it in his speech at UFA, independent of Western requirements. We're doing it ourselves. We don't need your help. Thank you, ma'am.
Well, and of course, the last-ditch effort of the West is really going to play out with this insidious legislation, TTIP and TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. And this is, why it is so crucial that communities right across Europe, starting in Greece, followed by Ireland, Spain, Portugal, Italy, France, the UK, and ultimately Germany. It's why communities need to start taking responsibility. Communities need to become adults instead of communities of children who are led by their supposed elected leaders who are doing anything but other than feathering their own proverbial nests. They need to start taking responsibility, because otherwise the raft of legislation that the global corporatists are determined to bring in, which will be supranational. I mean, if we think signing up to the EU was an act of treason, signing up to the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership is going to be treason on acid.
Well, it's going to be corporativism a la Mussolini.
Absolutely.
Corporations, the multinational corporations, the American multinational corporations primarily, who wrote the rules of the TTIP and the TPP. This is an Obama administration initiative, not a European initiative. They are going to create a corporativist, and I use the word very carefully, fascist model to control the entire world economy and the politicians with it. If you want that world, that's your choice. I, for one, don't. And I think the way that Russia and China and the SCO and the BRICS and the Eurasian Economic Union are building an alternative is a much more pleasant way to have cooperation, peaceful economic cooperation among sovereign nation states. Britain is now coming close. I know Mr. Cameron is trying every trick in the book to make sure that the referendum to leave the EU will be a failure, but the British population have a chance to really change British history to the better.
Well, I've said before, we have now less than 5 years. The next election is 2020, and we absolutely have to have an alternative in place to the status quo, because sadly, if we don't, then the legacy that we will be passing on to future generations really doesn't bear thinking about. William, Once again, we're out of time. I mean, obviously, the situation in Greece is going to unfold. In the morning, the Greek people will wake up realizing that they have been shafted by those who they had put their ultimate faith in. And it is going to require them to become adult and to take responsibility for their future.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's it for tonight. And tonight on Fracking Nightmare at 9 o'clock, we have a very interesting program. A lot of developments in the past week, and also a discussion with one of the country's leading specialists on radioactivity in the environment. So join me at 9 o'clock for Fracking Nightmare. So it's good night from me and good night from William Engdahl.
Thank you.